Hi guys, I just thought I'd make a couple of podcasts for you today, if I can get this thing to respond to me. Thank you. About some of the stuff we've been studying. So you'll find this podcast already on mitosis, meiosis, and cell theory. But last week we talked about the requirements for life and what we thought we needed. And you did actually a very good job. It was great. So we came to an agreement that we needed water, energy, we need to be able to exchange gases, we need to be able to remove wastes. I should have got them in the wrong order, haven't I? We needed to be able to reproduce, and then we needed to be able to sense and respond to our environment. So, water. Why water? Well, all life on our planet commenced in water. And when we go searching for life on other planets, we look for water. Are there things in there? So all the living things that we know about, the things we come across on our planet, require between 60 and 80% content of water. Ours is about 70%. Humans are around 70% water. This is because water is known as the universal solvent. It dissolves almost everything. Not everything, there are other solvents of course, but most things, especially those things that we need, that we're going to discuss in this little podcast, dissolve in water. And therefore we can move them from one place to another by a process called diffusion really simply and easily. So if we're nice and wet on the inside, and we are, oh well, I suppose I should talk about environment, shouldn't I? I'll talk about environments later. But on our internal environment, inside this layer of skin, I'm wet. So there's water inside my cells, and there's water between my cells, and it's there to allow things to move by diffusion quickly and efficiently. That's really important. If it starts to dry out, I get a headache. Energy obviously is crucial. We need energy to be able to do stuff. And we, all living things, rely on energy from our sun. There is some energy from the core that feeds some of our systems. So geothermal energy can be used, but generally for most living things on the surface of the planet, it's the sun that supplies our energy. But that comes as light. Now I know they sell chlorophyll tablets, but I haven't got any chloroplasts to store my chlorophyll in, so I can't photosynthesize. I'm trying to see if I can see any chloroplasts growing on my skin and be useful, wouldn't it? For our own solar arrays out, but anyway, we can't do it. So plants, fortunately, have an ancient prokaryote known as a chloroplast living in endosymbiosis inside plant cells, and they contain chlorophyll. And that pigment, chlorophyll, which gives them their green colour, can trap sunlight. And more than that, it allows for this chemical process we call photosynthesis that we talked about in class to combine carbon dioxide and water to create glucose. And glucose allows us to store chemical energy. So if an energy transfer, light energy from the sun has been transformed into stored chemical energy. But at this point in time it's useless. Fortunately for all of us, plants and animals, there's another prokaryote called a mitochondria which also has chosen to live inside plant and animal cells. It gets protection and feeding obviously, but for us it takes glucose and it burns it with oxygen. So it's an oxidization reaction, if the chemists in the room need that sort of detail. And this transforms the stored chemical energy into a form of energy that our cells can make use of. And that's known as adenosine triphosphate. So there's 3 phosphates. Phosphates is phosphorus combined with oxygen. So adenosine triphosphate is 3 phosphates, adenosine diphosphate is 2, and adenosine monophosphate is just 1 phosphate. And we see all 3 of these chemicals in cells, and they are able to move energy around the cell by gaining and losing phosphates. But there's a bit too much chemistry already, I'm sure. We also need to be able to do gaseous exchange. So we want to take the glucose that we've eaten and put it into our body systems. We want to burn it, and we want to burn it in oxygen. So we need to breathe in the oxygen. Of course, having done that, having taken in oxygen and burnt lots of glucose, we've got a whole lot of carbon dioxide that we want to get rid of. So we need to be doing gas exchange. We need O2 coming in and CO2 going out all the time. CO2 becomes really toxic, and one of the ways it becomes toxic is when CO2 and water form, they create carbonic acid. And so our blood becomes really quite acidic. So as our blood becomes more and more acidic, we want to breathe faster and faster. If our blood's alkaline, then we can be quite relaxed and breathe slowly. In plants, they need O2 and CO2 both coming in and going out all the time. So if they're photosynthesizing, they're photosynthesizing most of the day, so during the daytime a plant is producing lots of glucose by photosynthesizing. It's combining carbon dioxide coming in with water, and it's releasing oxygen. But it also needs to bring oxygen in to burn the glucose it's making, so it also has energy. And so it's cycling these gases and water vapor always through the plant body. So all living things have to be able to exchange gases, otherwise it doesn't work. We also have lots of waste we have to deal with. So we're not talking about poo here, as we said in class. Feces is simply leftover material we couldn't digest. Now, it's a really strange idea that it never entered our body. So we put the food into our mouth, but our digestive systems are external surfaces of our body. So the food passes through, we mush it all up, and we get what we can out of it, but what comes out the other end is waste, if you like, of the food destruction method, but it's not waste of our body. So what we're really talking about here is our urine. Our urine, and as Viv pointed out, our sweat. So in that we'll find chemicals that have been produced by our cells, so waste of our metabolism, and that needs to be got rid of too. So we need to make rid of that sort of stuff so it doesn't become toxic and poisonous. And so waste removal is really important. Obviously we have kidneys and bladders and things that filter our blood and store that waste until it's nice and full, and then we go to the toilet and release a whole lot of urine. Of course, we need to reproduce. If you think back to cell theory, cells always reproduce from pre-existing cells. So we need cells to do mitosis. We talked about mitosis quite a bit before we went to City Bound with Mrs. Anderson. So cells are always doing mitosis to make new cells. That's how you get bigger, that's how you grow. But even if you're a single cell, it's how you make new copies of yourself. Organisms also need to be able to replace themselves. So of course, the process known as meiosis makes sex cells, sperm and egg. And then we need to get those sperm and egg together in sexual reproduction to create a new member of our species. And so the success of a species is being able to replace itself. Some animals and lots of plants use a cloning mechanism called asexual reproduction, but they don't really make a copy. They don't make sex cells, they make a copy of themselves, they make a clone of themselves. This is less effective way of reproducing. It's quick, but tends to make complete copies, and so if you get a disease moving through, everyone's the same, they all get killed. So not a great way of moving about things. And that led us to that last requirement for life of living things. No matter how big you are, you need to be able to sense your environment and decide how to respond. So even worms have little light receptors, and as they move their way up through the soil, they get to the surface, they sense light, and they go back down again. Because they come to the surface, they get eaten. At night time, of course, they'll come to the surface because there's no light, unless it's a full moon, and they'll even react to the full moon and go back down. Because on the surface, there's much more danger. So everything needs to be able to sense danger and work out how to respond to it. So we can sense our external environment, and we use our senses that we know quite well, our ears, our eyes, our tongue, our nose, our touch. And we collect information and decide how to respond. Is that horrible perfume that woman's wearing going to make me sick? No, I'll ignore it. And after a while you forget it's even there. Is that large object hurtling towards my head likely to cause me some damage? Yes, I might dodge. But we also need to be able to make these sort of judgments about our internal environments. So we're talking about the environment within each cell, and also the environment around each cell that joins cells together. So we need to keep an eye on glucose. Is there enough glucose? Is there too much glucose? Is our blood becoming acidic? Is it too alkaline? Do we need to breathe faster or slower? Are we too hot? Are we too cold? And I'm talking about internally. Are we between 36 to 38 degrees Celsius internally, or am I going outside that, both of which are dangerous? Do I need more water? Am I thirsty? Do I need less water? Do I need to go to the toilet? Are there enough mineral salts? Is there enough sodium, potassium, calcium, phosphorus in my body to do the things I need? Do I need to go eat some food? So all these things are being sensed all the time, and your brain is making decisions about these things all the time. And that is the requirements of life.